My name is Michael Renke. I really struggled through a lot of my growing up with my own identity. That's not something that I had developed. I never really knew who Michael was. I'm diagnosed with a phobia called emetophobia, which is a fear of vomiting. It's an obsessive compulsive type phobia to where my mind fixates on that. And I could literally go a whole day being terrified that I'm gonna throw up. I kind of developed a sense of shame around it. It was a massive insecurity for me, so I got to the point where I was able to have a panic attack without anybody knowing that I was having a panic attack, and I was having them very often. At the end of high school, it was really bad, forcing myself through those things. There was a part of me that was still really seeking to find my identity. I hadn't found that, and started college. I very quickly dropped out. It finally got to the point where, I wasn't doing anything, I wasn't growing, didn't have any drive or focus, motivation. So my dad convinced me, why don't you move back home? One thing my dad and I always connected with was hot rods and motorcycles. We got to talking about that, and he said, why don't you go to school and actually learn how to do that the right way? It was a pretty quick decision, but I enrolled in a program called Wild Tech in Laramie, Wyoming. Immediately I found a ton of acceptance for all the negative aspects of my life. Coming out of Wild Tech, I got a job just outside of Salt Lake City, Utah. I moved out there and started working at my first hot rod shop. Shortly after I moved to Utah, I got stuck in one of those really intense panic attack cycles. I stopped going to work. I hadn't been to work in about 2 weeks. I finally convinced myself I needed to go into the emergency room. So they took me back there. They immediately gave me these 2 little blue pills, and 15 minutes later, I was calmer than I'd ever been in my entire life. I'd never heard of anxiety medication before. I didn't know that was a thing. It was like a magic off button. So that progressed all the way through my 20s. When I was 23, I moved to California. I met my wife. Her and I moved in together right away. We had a really kind of tumultuous relationship. So in 2016, we had been broken up for around 6 months, and she kicked me out of the house. Throughout that time, I was really struggling with my depression. When I drank or used benzos, it intensified my depression. I had decided I was gonna go get in my truck and drive to the interstate and go oncoming. Coming up to that intersection, because I was so intoxicated, I hit another car at the red light, and I got scared, and so I took off through the intersection, and I was going at really high rates of speed, and I ended up losing control of the truck. My truck rolled at least 3 times. In the accident, I was partially ejected out of the passenger side of the truck. I was significantly injured because I didn't have a seatbelt on, but not nearly as injured as I should have been. Right after my accident, I reconnected with my now ex-wife, and during that time, we decided that we wanted to get pregnant. So she lost the baby. I was under the assumption it was a miscarriage. I found out later that she'd had an abortion. Those things totally wrecked me. They totally destroyed me. I decided to stay in my marriage at that point when I had found those things out. A couple months after that, she decided she wanted a divorce and she kicked me out. So I started drinking right away the night that she kicked me out of the house. I was so stuck in this depression and had digging my hole so deep that I didn't even know how to get out of it. For the last year of my active addiction, I was just praying for God to give me something, help me out of this. And my parents ended up calling me one day. I was really intoxicated when they called me because I was always intoxicated. But they called me and asked me if I'd be willing to go to treatment. And I pretty well fell apart and said, absolutely, get me somewhere. I need something to change. Flew to Atlanta from California and enrolled in a detox program so that I could medically come down from alcohol and benzos. I went into HopeQuest directly after detox. Working with my therapist there was life-changing for me. What she asked me to do was this assignment that with the intent was to help release these resentments and these grudges that I had towards my ex-wife because I was holding on to these things, and I was using those as my reason for being a drunk. I really did what I could do to put myself in her shoes, the things that she'd experienced in her life growing up, to be able to find some empathy and understand. And I wasn't able to get there. And so it started to get dark outside, and I walked down from the porch of the men's residence down to the fire pit. And there's this beautiful cross down there at HopeQuest by the fire pit that at nighttime it's illuminated. I felt like God was telling me to go surrender and humble myself before him. So, I went to that cross and I knelt down and I put my face in the dirt and I said, here I am. that was when the change started. Because that was the first time in my life that I'd come humbly, absolutely stripped down. And a lot of people think of addiction as, a spiritual issue. It's an issue because you're not right with God. There's a part of it that is. There's also a part of it that's genetic, that's medical. There's also a part of it that's behavioral and psychological. That's what makes HopeQuest so different, is that they focus equally on each of those things, but they tie them in together. It's not just like, they're not three separate things. They're three things that interact with each other because that's how they are in you. I experienced it firsthand, and that's what sold me on it. I started working at HopeQuest, so today I've been working there for about 8.5 months. I've been sober since July 4th of 2019. There's not a doubt in my mind that if I hadn't gone to HopeQuest, when I went to HopeQuest, that I wouldn't be here.